Good evening. Welcome to another edition of the Press Club with me, Kendall Burton. Our special guest this evening, Mr. Earl Buske, no stranger to the Press Club. We've been here a number of times. We'll be reviewing, as normal, the big stories making the news. This time we're doing it locally, regionally, and internationally. Looking at the Hess oil sale, the U.S. spying controversy, elections in Trinidad, as well as a number of other issues. Let's start with the Hess oil sale, perhaps the biggest story this week in terms of the sheer amount of cash involved. We would have heard last week DBS carried that story, and the government of St. Lucia announcing this week that it had indeed received a communication from the Hess Oil Corporation about the sale. Hess Oil having agreed to sell its East Coast and St. Lucia interest or terminals to Buckeye Partners for a total of $850 million. The U.S. and oil gas company is in the process of reshaping its interest, and focusing its efforts and energies on more exploration and production than anything else. Buckeye Partners, we're told, is now acquiring something like 20 liquid petroleum terminals, bringing their total volume up to something like 39 million barrels. The St. Lucia Hess Oil facility has a capacity of about 10 million, I believe. Hess Oil, of course, having had a long history in St. Lucia in terms of its development, dating back to 1977, if I'm correct. 76. Then John Compton was the premier 400-acre facility for about $62 million investment. I know there were concerns from the facility in St. Croix about the time of the wisdom of investing in St. Lucia, and they were concerned that their facility would have been shut down. Interestingly enough, in this current sale, the St. Croix facility is one of those that's not being sold. Interesting turn of events. Back then, for $62 million invested in St. Lucia, 3,000 employees. I'm not sure what that figure is now, but there's obviously concern about the future of those employees and what the relationship will be with the new owners of Hess Oil. We've heard from the Prime Minister's press secretary that there will be a meeting between the Prime Minister and the new owners at some point. Are you privy to any additional information as far as that meeting, when that meeting will occur?
No, frankly, have no information on when the meeting is due, but I do know that the Prime Minister is waiting for that meeting, awaiting the meeting in order to be told what Buckeye is up to. But you know what? The bottom line is that the Hess facility in Cul-de-sac is going nowhere. Right. It can be picked up and taken away to the U.S. It is going to operate. It has a capacity for 9 million gallons. Buckeye, as you pointed out, now has storage for 39 million gallons. So it seems to me that what next should be for the Prime Minister and the government to not anticipate what Buckeye is up to, because they're coming to say what they're up to. But what I think we really should be looking at is, after 30 years of Hess presence here, almost 40 years, it has come to the end of a chapter. Leon Hess, the gentleman, has been good to St. Lucia historically. His company has been good to St. Lucia, less under his son than under him. But right now, through hostile takeover, the Hess family has been pushed out of the leadership and control of the Hess Corporation. Leon Hess is no longer, John Hess is no longer chairman. So the Hess factor at Hess is becoming less of a factor. And I think this allows for St. Lucia to begin to consider, what would we like to see happen at Cul-de-sac? Should it continue to be like a state within a state, which is what it was under the Hess Corporation, because Hess stored oil here, part of which was provided to the U.S. Air Force. And therefore, the Hess facility was regarded as an offshore extension of the United States. The legislation, the Hess Oil Refinery Act, which was so named to give the impression that a refinery was going to be constructed when that was never on the cards. But the protection that that legislation gives the Hess Oil Corporation includes the fact that American military interests could come here and take over the company if it was considered to have a security problem. Over the years, Hess has been a closed shop operating without a fence, within a fence. Why don't we think of what next for Hess? We have the storage capacity for 9 million gallons. Can we encourage the Buckeye people to allow us to use it to, for example, store Petrocaribbean oil? The Venezuelans continue to export Petrocaribbean oil to the countries that are getting from it directly from Caracas. What if we ask Buckeye to work with us and the CARICOM and OECS governments to join with Venezuela to transform the cul-de-sac facility into a storage for 9 million gallons of Petrocaribbean oil, which would be shipped to Dominica, St. Vincent, Grenada, Antigua, Guyana, and those countries that do not have oil or oil facilities. So that would open a new industry for St. Lucia.
I'm sure all of those will be down for discussion when they do.
Yeah, how about encouraging Buckeye to let us increase the employment factor by allowing the Hess facility here to go into manufacturing of lubricants, machine oil, and those sort of things. Yeah, that we could export to the other OECS countries. Why can't the Prime Minister maybe call for a OECS summit meeting or at the next CARICOM meeting to ask the other CARICOM countries to join St. Lucia in a sort of a regional partnership that would allow St. Lucia to be the base, because we'll be depending on fossil fuels for some time. We're talking right now, the thing is about alternative energy, wind farming, solar energy, geothermal, but we're going to be using that for a time. We had a contract to turn garbage into electricity at Deglo. It never got off the ground. So considering that we will be depending on fossil fuels for some time, I would like to know that the government of St. Lucia comes up with a plan and a proposal as to what we would like to see, rather than allow Buckeye to take care of its other 30 million storage capacity, which is on the U.S., you know, and just leave the Hess facility empty, which is what we're afraid of. But it's not going anywhere. I think we need to come up with a plan.
But of course, those are suggestions.
Suggestions.
Yeah. That leads us into two other topics that we have down for discussion. You were talking about the economic situation that drove or created this sale to Buckeye. We're going to look at the global economic situation and some of the predictions that have come out this week, including by our Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Commerce. Also, we want to look at developments in Trinidad and Tobago, which you mentioned. So perhaps we could shift to what predictions were made this week by Titus Preville. Looking at the global scenario, we did an interview with him after Jason Hollingsey did that is the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Commerce. He says Business Development, Investment and Consumer Affairs Titus Preville is predicting a recovery in the world economy and says St. Lucia must be prepared to take advantage of the resulting opportunities. Similar sentiments have been shared by the Chamber of Commerce, the Employers Federation, that we shouldn't just throw our hands up in the air, you know, but we must be creative. We must be exercise some degree of foresight, you know, and keep our hands on the pulse, you know, of what's happening globally and see what opportunities present themselves. There still are opportunities for investment, still opportunities for employment creation. That's been a big deal, not just in St. Lucia, the world over. We're talking about a 3% increase in unemployment. Need to correct that, by the way. I did have a conversation with the Director of Statistics. That is a misrepresentation of the figures. What he says is that there was an increase, but it's more like 1.5, 1.6% and not 3%, as has been reported in the media, including on DBS. So we just want to correct that. But unemployment remains a big issue. And as the predictions for positive change in the global economy are made and people get all worked up and excited, we must bear in mind the human casualties of the crisis, and unemployment remains a major challenge. I know in the US, Japan, and some of the peripheral Eurozone members, we're talking about unemployment figures of about 9 million from the second quarter of 2008 up to 2013. In some places, you have employment as, well, I'm not sure if I should say as high or as low as 5%, but at 1.6%, that is a significant figure for St. Lucia. But the general predictions seem to be positive, that there is some recovery happening in Europe, especially, even though Spain, by the way, I'm told,
They had their first quarterly
Right.
positive results.
although their unemployment
2
rate,
years.
interestingly enough, is higher than the U.S.
Yeah.
And the unemployment is higher than the U.S. But there are positive signs of recovery. Unemployment, of course, remains a concern for everybody, as it does here in St. Lucia. But the PS in the Ministry of Commerce, like the Chamber of Commerce, is saying that we need to tap into those opportunities as they present themselves, as they come up. We had the Ministry of Commerce also talking about, and the Ministry of Health as well, joining in encouraging young people to be creative, find their own employment, start their own businesses. We had the launch of the Junior Achievers program this week, encouraging young people to go in that direction and help alleviate the unemployment situation. We were talking about the economic recovery. 7 million jobs lost in the advanced economies, the US, Japan, peripheral Eurozone economies, 9 million altogether. On the other hand, we've had countries like Germany, we've had Canada, Australia, UK, who have bucked the trend and actually created employment. Latest statistics showing 3.5 million jobs created in those countries. Interestingly, as the advanced economies struggle to recover, the upcoming and developing economies have been doing very well as far as job creation. We're talking about a global perspective now. Reportedly about 44 million jobs created. So it seems to be that there's a ratio of about 1 to 3, 1 to 4 jobs being created. So every job that's lost in the advanced economies, you have the developing economies creating or generating at least 3 jobs. So we're talking about 44 million jobs in the emerging markets. We have countries like Turkey. They've also been doing well. Italy now ranks as the 11th largest employer in the world. Some interesting statistics coming out for October. China, Indonesia, Mexico lead in job creation. More interesting facts there. And all of those jobs, the 37 million jobs created, that happened in the last 12 months alone. So there's a lot of signs that things are changing. There's positive change happening. But again, as Brian Louisi has said, as Titus Prevel has said, we need to keep our eyes open. We need to be innovative in order for us to seize the opportunities and enjoy some of the same successes. Yeah.
I have mixed views on these sorts of predictions.
Yeah, well, that's why we have you here, to share those views so we can discuss them.
Yeah, I have mixed views on that, Kendall, as you would understand. I don't normally take my view on world economic projections from the World Bank or the IMF. As Bretton Woods organizations, which are becoming 50 years old this year, they tend to overlook the underdeveloped and developing countries and stress more on the developed countries, which are the ones which created and run them. And developing countries belonging to both the World Bank and the IMF are now calling for serious changes, because what has happened in the past week, I've read 2 reports coming from recent meetings of both the IMF and the World Bank. And in both cases, they are under pressure from China and other developing countries to change the way in which they operate and to give more say to the developing world. I normally take my readings on Caribbean and Latin American growth forecasts from ECLAC, the Economic Commission on Latin America and the Caribbean, which, unlike the World Bank and the IMF that tend to put Latin America and the Caribbean together as one block, ECLAC does it, yes, as one block, but also separates Latin America from the Caribbean, so that the readings you get from ECLAC would tell you how St. Lucia is doing within CARICOM and within the Latin America and the Caribbean. The World Bank would hardly, and the IMF in the country origins, their country, specific country networks, they would give you something to the Ministry of Finance. But in the international assessments, they would not necessarily reflect St. Lucia. Having said so, I agree with both the Chamber of Commerce and the PS in the Ministry of Commerce that we can't just shove our hands in the air. We need to take advantage of the new openings and the new possibilities. But I'd also be careful there from the standpoint that, one, you and I monitor world economic growth annually, and what you will notice is that at the beginning of every year, the growth prospects are high. And when the year is getting closer to an end, the growth prospects reduce. They become closer to the realistic figure. And it's happening year after year after year. In the case of St. Lucia and the Caribbean, ECLAC from very early had indicated that we would be looking at in the region of between 3 and 4% growth in Caribbean economies over the past 2 years. At the level of the IMF and the World Bank, however, the forecasts have been for much less because they have been including Latin America and the Caribbean as one block. I think that St. Lucians have begun to understand the importance of knowing and realizing that our economy is locked into the world economy, that the things we do today will affect us tomorrow. And it is beginning to reflect in how we live. I read an article in The Voice recently where a former school principal was offering the view that one of the reasons why the birth rate has reduced by half in the past 2 years is because parents are recognizing the economic cost of raising children. I think people are beginning to do things bearing in mind survival. I had two very interesting examples of that. Simple as they might sound, they show that less people are throwing their hands in the air and more are looking for things to do, creating new avenues. One has to do with a simple little initiative by a couple of young girls or young ladies in Marigot who on Whit Monday organized a sort of a water sports activity for children from the area. With support from the community, they made it. They had kayaking, they had all of that. I wasn't there, but I read about it. And as far as they say, they did it for free with the hope that the parents and everybody would see that it is something worth supporting so that they could turn it into a regular something that will provide jobs for them. I found that to be very, very exciting and encouraging. The second one was I also read that somewhere in Grosley, the Pantime Steel Band has gotten in touch in cooperation with a number of other community entities, and they have introduced a new element in our tourism where they have trained Pantime tour guides who are tour guides who would take, and they had their first visit by cruise ship visitors who would be taken to the Pantime Steel Yard in Grosley, and they would be not just shown the steel band and told about it, they would actually be given lessons on how to play it, etc. Now, I mean, that is just Pantime in Grosley. We have an annual steel band competition. That means we have so many panyards, but that is a start. And if it gets off good, and the visitors want more panyards, or there's a need for more panyards to be visited, there you have employment opportunities for the people playing the pan in between the season, for the tour guides. You'll need more tour guides to explain, and it would create a whole new additional element in the creative industries insofar as tourism is concerned.
Not to mention the word of mouth advertising that those people will do for us when they go back home. And for the Pan Festival as well as Carnival.
Now what I would like the Chamber of Commerce and the Ministry of Commerce, or the PS in the Ministry of Commerce, to be able to tell me is, apart from telling us that we should take advantage, I would like to hear them come up
with some ideas,
with the ideas that would enable us to take advantage. I know you have the Junior Achievement, which has been there for ages. The Chamber of Commerce has a number of youth entrepreneurial initiatives.
Right.
So those things are happening. What we need to do, folks, is to give them a little more pep. Take them from the stage of us just having 5 or 10 people graduating every year to one where we would have 5 or 10 sets of young people creating new avenues of employment that the government and the private sector would be prepared to assist them by either helping them do it or assisting them in other ways.
Okay, we're due for a break. Let's take that break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation. We're talking about the economic situation, employment. We'll shift over to the local elections in Trinidad this week, and we'll talk about some of the other stories making the news this week. We'll be right back.